It's Thursday, July 4th. You're watching Daybreak on Arise News from our studios in Nigeria's capital of Abuja. And it's time for the press review as promised with Dr. Constance Ikoku, Arise News analyst, social commentator and journalist. Good morning.
Good morning, Adeswandi. How are you guys this morning?
Great. It's a dry morning in Abuja. Thankfully, it's rained all through the night.
I know. And talking about the rain, we're coming to that. But before that, let's introduce our guest today who will be looking at the headlines. With us, we have in the offside studio, Otumba Shegu Showumi. He is a newspaper executive and a political commentator. Otumba, welcome to the morning program this morning.
It's nice to be here. Thank you, ladies.
Okay, so let's go to our Punch newspaper. Yes, Adesu are talking about the rain. There was a 10-hour rainfall yesterday in parts of Lagos and Ogun State as well. Businesses were grounded. There was a house collapse, and it rained heavily. The result, flooding has brought down a two-story building in Mushi area of the state. The flood overwhelmed residents while many pupils were unable to attend school. The rain lasted between 9 and 12 hours depending on the area where you reside. Places such as Ikeja, Ogba, Agege, Yanoworo, Bagada, Lekki, Lagos Island, a lot of other areas were affected. Victims of the building collapse were rescued alive, thankfully. But many residents were trapped in their apartments. Well, you know, this is a yearly occurrence in Lagos State and some other parts of the country. Lagos is particularly hit because it's a coastal city and it's poorly urbanized. You have drainage problems here and there. And then you also have the sand filling on many areas from the Atlantic Ocean. It was a bad day yesterday for Lagos State. Otumba, let's start with you.
Well, I think that we have come to the realization that the international campaign about the ozone layer and what nature is doing, we now have to take it seriously here. Clearly, our circumstances based on our infrastructural deficit over the years is beginning to become a yearly occurrence. And I think that over and above the fact that we like to do quick fixes and carry ourselves to go commission easy things, it's time for us now to look at comprehensive management of underground waterways in such a way that we can do what countries like Indonesia have done and other locations in the world where they have figured out a way to bring the waters that is on their road underground. Some put to good use, others return back into the waters. And then we now need to look at our planning from the point of view of anything that is standing in the way and making the wetlands and all of the places that will make the waters come in and go out easily. We have to obviously now be strict about implementation and enforcement. And we also have to beg the citizens. There's no point in agonizing, getting angry, shaming yourself just because of these natural disasters that will come almost fairly regularly now. If the rains are heavy, you're going to have flooding. If you have flooding, it's going to impact roads, it's going to impact movements of people, it's going to impact all our lives. But we make it worse for ourselves when we go into a frenzy of criticism, not in a measured manner, but in an angry manner that seems to say that those who have the big responsibility are not doing their work. And I want to say thumbs up to the guy in charge of that process in Lagos, Wahab, who I see the way he responds when people call him out and ask him questions. I see the way he's busy. I think Lagos is up to something. They just need to scale it up significantly. They need to bring the World Bank and all of the donor agencies to come in there and provide a kind of resource so that we can save the entire place. And I think the same goes to those cities that are within that corridor. Ogun is also greatly impacted. And I think the environmental agencies of the country and the kinds of resources that is available to help them to scale up and mitigate some of these challenges now need to be put in place. But the fact is that nature is telling us that we need to take those issues around ozone layer, depletion of it, greening of the place. We need to take it seriously. But even common sense should tell us that we need to make sure that we can channel our roads and our waterways better. So It was a hard day, but we thank God it wasn't as worse as it could have been. At least for the house collapse, people survive. You know, so that's my original take.
Okay. I mean, I was born and raised in Lagos. Very wonderful memories growing up in that city. It's totally not what it used to be. It's highly overpopulated now, and that's part of the challenges that Lagos faces. Different governments have tried over the years to put in place sufficient infrastructure in order to address, you know, the huge challenges of that mega city. But it seems like that hasn't been enough, especially now. Along the Lekki corridor, that area is a fairly new area that has developed within the, shall we say, 10, 15 years. You know, when I was growing up, there was nothing there. So when you go to that area, it's also hugely impacted because it's closer even to the coastline. And now we're also building a city in the Atlantic Ocean. This was one of the projects of the current president. So would that even make the situation better? I mean, do you think that we're able to handle this going forward also with climate change challenges?
You know, a lot of factors are at play here. I totally align with Segun Showomi this morning. We're talking about government response, our own footprints as individuals. What do we do? Yesterday, I know that a house was locked up for, this is what happened. There was flood, right? The flash floods in Lagos. These occupants of this house in Lagos decided to empty their trash onto the streets in the flooded waters. And like you said, kudos to Tokunbo Wahab, who is the Commissioner, Ministry of Environment and Water Resources in Lagos State. He will be on Arise News Morning Show, by the way, this morning to speak more. So imagine that sort of behavior from individuals. We have a situation in our hand, and you took your trash and emptied it on the streets. Imagine if the government had not done all the activities they had done already in place. Imagine what Lagos would have been yesterday. But this happened despite measures taken. So we need a lot more to be done. I know he also responded to a tweet yesterday, which I followed. He said there'll be more destruction of houses. The more houses we need to go because they are building on drainages and canals. I hope he speaks better to that when he appears on the Morning Show later today. Unfortunately, it's climate change. We've seen it around the world. Who would have thought that Dubai would have, you know, caved under so much rain a couple of months ago? We saw what Dubai became. And this is going to keep happening whether we like it or not. What do we need to do to mitigate the consequences is where we are at. Speaking
to the point on trash, you know, pouring trash on the streets, that's a human factor, human behavior, which of course needs to be taken care of individually. You know, people drive, you know, their cars and then throw things out of the car. But that also speaks to proper waste management. Indeed. Because if you do not have proper waste collection and management and, you know, refuse disposal, that's also an issue indeed.
Not just, yeah, I was going to immediately say two angles to this. You talked about infrastructure. Over the years, why do we position being proactive? I was reading a story this morning where Wahab said that the residents should not get frightened, the rains will soon subside and the waters will flow. For me, that's elementary. Of course, when the rain stops, the waters will flow away and things will return to normal. That's not the kind of thing I'm expecting to hear. The basic thing is, one, infrastructure. Then being proactive. These things happen in Lagos particularly because Lagos is below sea level over the years. So what proactive action has the government been taking over the years when you know rain is going to come? And then there's this thing I hear regularly, when rain starts coming, you say people move. That's really, move to where? What have you provided for people to move to? That's one. Then there's a second aspect of this. Not just that the people, waste management like you talked about, you know, but attitude. Attitude. I mean, I have driven at times and people are in my car, or somebody's in my car, and maybe you take something and you want to throw it out of the window. It doesn't matter who you are. If you're in my car, drop it there. When I get to a dustbin or something, or I tell you when you get to a dustbin, put it there. So our attitude counts volumes. The way we treat waste. Don't drop waste carelessly, like that's what I was talking about, how somebody poured out waste just like that because
the house was immediately locked up yesterday.
Right. Okay, let's go to this day newspaper. Here, Senate flays federal government's poor implementation of 9 trillion naira capital components in budget. The Senate, from this article, is implying that the government is doing a poor job of running the budget. The Minister of Finance, Wale Edu, has been urged to improve the funding of capital aspects of the budget where performance can be showcased. Chairman of the Senate Committee on Appropriation, Solomon Adiola, asked the minister to engage more with ministries, departments, and agencies. He says some agencies have not been given money for capital projects. Wow. Okay, this is July. We're almost half of the year. We're already half of the year. I think the chairman of appropriation, Adiola, knows what he's saying. He sits in an oversight function. He sees what's going on, so he's in a position to understand where the failures are and where improvements should be made. Shago.
I think, with due respect to Adiola, the chairman of appropriation, I think what people must understand is that it's one thing for you to make a budget, which is also an intention of how you want to spend money. The reality of the matter is that you have to then manage the resources you have. If you don't have money, obviously whatever you write in your fancy paper, you won't be able to implement. If you are haphazard with your implementation, obviously you are going to favor some at the expense of others. If you are wasteful with your use of resources, throwing money on palliatives and all of those type of truly difficult things to explain as a way to jack up an economy, you are going to have a dysfunctional budget. Now, if you run a government that doesn't understand that budget discipline helps the country to plan properly and helps them to be able to scale up how the planning impacts their intention, you're going to get this. So whatever Adiola is saying, I agree. But I think that as a government that is majorly populated by members of the same Lagos cabal, I think it's best that they just call themselves into the room and speak some sense into each other and tell themselves that this is not business as usual. You don't have enough money. You're borrowing a lot. And the worst thing you can do is now not have budget and fiscal discipline.
I've been down this road many times. You know, in previous years, we've always discussed budget approval and then execution. Due to inefficiencies in the system and sometimes bureaucratic bottlenecks, what is approved is eventually not properly executed. That means at the end of the year, you still have money lying down and you haven't used that. That's a problem.
Yeah, Adela says out of the 9 trillion, only 1.84 has. The problem here seems to, the major issue here seems to be funding. And like he said over there, the fact that the government is borrowing, they don't have money. It's how are you going to manage it? Because what Adela is complaining about, or the issue he's raising, when Madain, the Accountant General, and Coordinating Minister of Finance, Wale Edu, appeared before the Committee on Appropriation, is that they are not funding this capital project. And that is where the government will showcase what it is doing. If the projects are not funded, what do you do? So, and like Wumi raised there, it's a matter of coming to sit together and talk about what do we do because they're borrowing, because there's no money, as they say. And so what the question here is just funding. How do you fund and get this project off the ground? So
where's all the money being borrowed going into?
That's the next question to ask.
Palliatives or what? That is why you wanted to say something.
I was just going to say, okay, so we see that the Senate is performing its oversight function, but we also do understand that one of the purpose of the budget is to help reflate the economy, especially when it comes to capital projects such as this. So it will be counterproductive if we've seen the extension of even the supplementary budgets. We've seen the extension of this budget, and then you say you are not, the budget is not performing optimally because you're not funding it. So what exactly are we doing? Do we even understand what is going on?
So many questions for the government.
So many questions.
So the Minister of Finance, who also doubles as the coordinating minister for the economy. That was a position that was specifically created under Jonathan's administration when Dr. Konjo-Iweala was the Minister of Finance.
As a super minister.
Yes, so he is coordinating the entire economy. I hope the coordination is going well. It doesn't look like. We do note that there are tough challenges at this time, but I think there are so many expectations from Nigerians. Let's go to Daily Trust. An interesting story that we'll be looking at here. LGBT. Nigeria signs $150 billion Samoa deal. Clerics, CSOs furious. It's not about same-sex marriage, says minister's aide. And then the National Assembly says they didn't consider this agreement. That's according to Rep. Yusuf. This controversial Samoa agreement reportedly has some clauses that compel underdeveloped and developing nations to support the agitations by lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender community for recognition as condition for getting financial and other support from advanced societies. Named after the Pacific island Samoa, where it was signed in November 2023, the agreement is gradually gaining traction, despite opposition by many countries that cherish Islamic and Christianity values in addition to their cultures. Information about the ratification of this deal by Nigeria came to light on July 1, that's just a couple of days ago, excuse me, when the Minister of Budget and Economic Planning, Atiku Bagudu, confirmed it at a reception by the European Union in Abuja. But when contacted, Bagudu's media assistant, Bolaji Adebiyi, said documents signed by Nigeria were strictly for economic development. He said nowhere in the document was same-sex marriage mentioned. What Bagudu signed was in relation to $150 billion trade component, he insisted. But others say certain parts of the articles of this agreement promotes LGBT causes. They say Nigeria signs documents generally without knowledge of the content. You know, this is a touchy subject, not only in Nigeria but the world over. The country probably needs more clarification from the minister and to hear from him directly on what this is about. I think that needs to happen, Shegu.
Evolution suggests that the things we call culture, the things we call habits, and the things we call way of life over many years is always evolving. The sad part of it is that every generation struggles to hold on to its past ways of doing things and its previous culture. But we haven't found any evidence in human existence that the past has succeeded in stopping the future. As offensive as it is to this generation, to my generation and the generation before, that the world will now begin to normalize homosexuality and such habit, we have to be educatively aware that we will not be able to stop people from exercising their choices. And I know that for reasons best known to some countries in the world, this agenda seems to override other more important agenda like poverty, like lighting up Africa, like helping us with flood, like opening up the world for us to participate in trade. But that is the reality of where we are. What I think has happened is that the dangling of $150 billion to a government and a nation that is extremely depressed in terms of foreign resources and needy, so needy, they have signed up, pretended as if they could hide it under the table, but the world has changed. You have to come to the table with the reality. We need to know what is about to hit us, and we need to deal with it. The upside for us is that nobody is forcing anybody to be LGBT. Ultimately, what they're saying is those people that have that tendencies should be able to exist. So at some point in time, it's going to be back to Africa within their families to reorientate themselves and their children to hold on to their culture if they will succeed.
Well, I think one of the arguments on this topic is usually that African countries or developing countries are compelled or forced to take on these courses because there are conditions tied to financially helping them or giving them financial assistance.
Indeed. Now, if, and this is a big if this is true, then it reeks of desperation for funds, as Shekushomi has mentioned, is usually tied to, those funds that are tangled. But again, this paper reports that they've been unable to reach the government officials. And I think that there's a lot of explanation that needs to be done from the Office of the Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice, the Office of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and the Office of the Minister of Budget and Economic Planning, who are all centered around this controversial $150 million deal that was signed apparently in Samoa. The Nigerian government will recall, you all recall that we have in place a same-sex prohibition act that was signed in January of 2014, which prohibits all of this and even puts stiff penalties, including a 14-year imprisonment. So because we have not heard from the government, if this is true, then something is terribly wrong because we have a law in place.
Well, the minister's media assistant did say there was nothing like same-sex marriage, but other people or experts and commentators are saying you need to come out and speak because a lot of times you don't even know what is in
the content of what you're signing.
But former President Goodluck Jonathan, who signed that bill that you talked about in 2014, he incurred heavily the wrath of the Western nations when he did that. And I think it was one of the reasons why he was not supported for a second term. So now we are here again. It looks like he who pays the piper dictates the tune.
Well, you won't say that about Kenya. Kenya had to vehemently tell IMF this financial taxes is causing problems for us in our nation. And so the president stood up to IMF and told the IMF, I am not doing this because of my people, even though the protests are still going on. The point is this: you cannot force another country to kowtow to your way of life. And that's why not just Nigeria, so many African countries, doesn't matter the development that is going on over the years, there are just some things you can't take as a person or as a country, and nobody can force it down your throat, and Nigeria has it in their constitution. It's not just at family level, even at the national level. But the point here again is that the CSOs, the clerics are saying that there's a part of the signing of the agreement that talks about the LGBT. The responsibility, onus lies on them now to, eke it out, show where it is when the government is saying that it's strictly business. And the government owes it to Nigerians because, of course, the controversies that are involved in this, to come out plainly and say this was strictly business. One thing is clear. Nigerians are not going to allow that. I mean, you're not going to force it down the throat of anybody. But the government has a responsibility. Come clear. And the people who are saying there are undertones, they also have a responsibility to reveal why they say it when the government is saying this or that. So,
and just to quickly add that this story also goes further to say that this proposal was initially made in 2023, where the Nigerian government at the time refused to sign it. And then all of a sudden, recently, it has been signed by this administration. So the ministries have a lot to tell Nigerians.
Yeah, it may just be that, just like you're saying, it's one or two ways. Either they kowtowed or they tweaked. The people who were asking, who Nigeria wants to get this loan from, agreed with what Nigeria is saying. But then again,
it's all conjecture until we hear from them.
Until
right, so we'll be watching that. Let's go to Vanguard newspaper. Terrorists kidnap Kaduna judge, kill son, and demand 300 million ransom. This was a female judge who was kidnapped with her children. Her eldest son has been killed, and they're threatening to kill her other kids if the ransom is not paid. The name of the victim is Janet Galadima, and her children are 4 in number. The son killed is 14 years old. He was shot after the ransom demanded was not produced. They were abducted at their residence while her husband was away. This is a parent's worst nightmare. Really tragic day in Kaduna there. I mean, Kaduna has been the epicenter of kidnappings. We've seen school children kidnapped severally. Some returned, some did not return over the years. You know, a big challenge. And this particular judge that was kidnapped with her children, they said her husband was away at the time. Her husband is a medical doctor. There were negotiations going on. And then it was reduced to about 290-something million naira. They still were unable to pay, and they shot her son. You know, nightmare, Shego.
Your heart literally sinks when you realize that as gory as this story is, it has become a regular breakfast, lunch and dinner we eat in this country. And it's okay to be sad. It's okay to be very empathetic. The question that any sensible person will ask, where is the pathway of a solution that takes us out of this mess? Otherwise, is this going to be the same story tomorrow, next day? And that's why we keep saying we need to accept the reality of state or multi-layer policing. You can't be under-policed. You can't have policing that does not come from the community. You can't have a framework to manage such a huge country with diverse land size and people. You can't have a scenario where governors do not have the infrastructure to insist that not in my state. And then you keep explaining you have converted it into a business. People are really making our lives hard. And yet, those who have the responsibility of figuring out how to keep us safe in our houses. How do you explain this? A family is sleeping at home, she's a judge, her husband is a medical doctor. That's high level in any society. The bloody killed her son, and you can't get any rage, you can't get any anger. I'm tired. I think that we must accept that technology will give us low orbit resonance to look at the states in our spaces. Our telecom system is so supposedly interlinked with NIM. We need policing, we need intelligence, we need to say enough. Otherwise, how long can we go with this? I feel pity for them. I'm so broken and I'm so totally distraught because it could happen to just anybody.
You know, like Shegu said, she is tired. A lot of people are tired of this kind of stories because it can happen to anyone. The information was that the security forces were informed, but of course they seemed helpless. They weren't able to do anything, and so that negotiation for ransom had to continue. And here we are. She hasn't been released. The woman is still being held. It's so traumatic for the family.
The IG just yesterday or thereabout held a meeting with Dubai security, Dubai generally, talking about training, that Dubai is better than Nigeria in using technology in security to fight crimes and what have you. And the fact of training, Nigeria has got to a place where they must really apply technology. But then the challenging and the thing that is really annoying about these kind of stories, over time, one keeps saying it turns out to be like a broken record. I mean, we've watched some films and you see when kidnappers ask for ransom, the monies are marked. Even if it's 15 years, 10 years, the people who spend this money, you get them. But how come in our own situation, the people who perpetrate these crimes collect these monies, no one ever gets to hear that they were caught, and then deterrence meted out? Because then that would tame this, that would to an extent begin to cut down this. I mean, aside the fact that we should find a way, like he said, of curbing these things. It's such a pity, and it makes you want to cry.
This is pure criminality. That's what it was. That's what it is. You're bargaining with people. You know, it's like bargaining for for foodstuff in the market. This is sheer criminality and shouldn't be condoned at all.
Indeed. Our thoughts and prayers go to the family of the judge and those who are in captivity of kidnappers at the time in this country. And we will just appeal to the government. You know, the Bola Tinubu administration has prides itself as one that has come into power and will not negotiate with bandits, which the president has now termed as terrorists. He doesn't see any difference between bandits and terrorists. And they also pride themselves in, you know, trying to be as proactive as possible. We've seen the kidnappings that have happened even in Kaduna since this administration came into power. They were swift in recovering or releasing or whatever they did in getting those students back home in a matter of days, unlike what we have seen in the past. And the administration takes pride in that. So we hope that they're able to replicate this. But beyond that, let us see justice being meted to those who carry out this crime. I know very recently somebody wrote an article. When you see those who allegedly carry out these kidnappings, they look very wretched, very dirty, very poor. And then you wonder, the money of the ransoms that have been collected definitely doesn't go to such people. These are just the footmen. Can we get to the root of kidnapping in this country? Because it does look like every ransom money that has been paid does not go to these foot soldiers who look terrible, they look hungry, they look tired. Where is the money going to? Like Indy said, we should trace it. The banks need to do more. The security agencies, we thank them for their service, but they need to do more. Nigerians need to sleep with both eyes closed.
Yeah, indeed, not one open. All right, you're still watching. It's not a laughing matter. You're still watching Daybreak. We'll be back in a bit with more of the review of the papers. Stay with us.
Welcome back. You're still watching the paper review on Daybreak, coming to you from Nigeria's capital, Abuja. Dr. Constance Ikoku is here to do justice, as well as our guest analyst for today, Segun Showumi, a politician and social commentator as well.
Yes, Adeswa. So let's go to this day. One more story from there before we move on to the international headlines. With 800 violent attacks, 7,000 deaths, Tugar calls for joint action against terror. Senate rejects probe of past military equipment funds, spending on universities and yacht. Well, probe. Senate is rejecting the probe. Why shouldn't there be a probe of past spendings? I mean, this story ties to the security story on Kaduna State, so, you know, happening all over the country. But why shouldn't there be probe on past spendings? Who is afraid of accounting for their expenditures? After all, it's public fund, Segun.
It's the kind of Senate we have because of the kind of government in place and the kind of country we run. Ideally, that probe of past military spending is supposed to be something that is so demanded so that they can figure out whether they have given enough money to them or the monies are not being used or whatever. But if they reject it, it's within their right to do. So there's no point wasting saliva on that. The best that I want to talk about is the one that Tugar, as the Minister of Foreign Affairs, is talking about. If you look at the world over, America, UK, and some other country, you will notice that nations are falling back into their nationalistic lines, where they're beginning to say, okay, we get globalization, but we need to survive first as citizens. Yeah. And I think when it comes to this terrorism thing, Nigeria needs to ask itself very clear, are we interested in all these protocols that makes us the victim of all of the regs of the world from other countries, or have we gotten to a point where we're going to say the life of a Nigerian and the territorial integrity of Nigeria comes first? Those are policy decisions that they need to ask, because those questions will answer the question as to where are these people coming into our country to come and kill our people, and how do they escape? But I guess we'll have to wait until we're able to be in charge of the country to be able to tell them this is how to do things. You need to be able to account for your citizen. You need to be able to account for your border. You need to be able to make sure that people in your country understand that crime will not be tolerated here. If other countries can do it, the greatest, the biggest black nation in the world must understand it has to do it too. So not probing them It's the way they are. The way they are.
You know, I was looking at the number, 800 violent attacks and 7,000 deaths. I think that is very conservative because the terrorism that we're talking about has started way back. Was it under President Goodluck Jonathan? Yes, a little bit before that, but you know. So I think this is a very conservative number. It's way more than that.
I think it was
sure.
This is in the first five months of 2024.
Yeah, it was looking at 5 months
of 2024.
Yes.
Okay, and we have this number.
Yes.
I still think it's probably much more than that. But again, he's calling for a joint action against terror. I mean, you are the government. You are in government. You have a position there. It's an APC government, so they should be doing it already rather than talking about it this way.
Yes, so the thing is, we understand that we have a problem. More often than not, we understand the solutions. But, you know, we just have all of these talk shops that go unending, and then we come back another year and talk about the same things, this talk shop all over again. He's talking about collaboration with beyond the borders of Nigeria. I think that's what the Minister of Foreign Affairs was calling for, that beyond Nigeria, because like you've said, this is across the sub-region, and we're seeing it as a consequence of what has happened over the years. I mean, from Libya, we've seen the flow of arms into the country and how instability in all of these countries just trickles down, and the consequences we see, and we are at the receiving end. There are also national problems that we also need to tackle, like the root causes, for instance, of these problems. What have we done about them? There's a high level of poverty. We have this ideology that is being sold to the people by terrorist groups, and that continues to fester. What are we doing about that? If we do not tackle that, then we do have this on our hands. Beyond that, we have our borders that are porous, and we have these arms that are coming in. That's another question for the customs and those who secure the country, how this gets in. It's a lot of things going on. But really, I think the collaboration is asking for is not new. We've had the Joint Multinational Task Force. What has happened to that task force? How much is Nigeria putting into that? And why are we not seeing its effectiveness? So what will be different in what Mr. Tuga is asking for is what is left to be seen.
Right.
These numbers are damning. For the first 5 months of 2024 alone, 7,000 needless deaths, if you ask me.
Well, sometimes, you know, the fight against terror has also been politicized in this country along religious and ethnic lines, which does not help us. You know, that's not what we should be doing, because we are confronted with this big problem, and if it's not solved, there is no economic progress that can be made. For, you know, you have to have security before you can do any other thing.
Indeed.
In the country.
Questions will be asked on the value we place as a nation, as individuals, on lives. Just the other day, I was watching a viral video. Someone was busy taking a video of a woman who was on top of a bridge, who jumped over and died. And I was asking myself, what kind of a heart does this person have to be comfortable to take a video of somebody who is trying to commit suicide? That's the big question to be asked. The Tuga was saying here that United Nations, UN Nigeria yesterday said its maiden peace-building program tagged Summit of the Future New Agenda for Peace was aimed at advancing measures at tackling security-related issues. The world is a village. You can't run away from it. So there's a need to come together to tackle issues that, you know, are common to countries all over the world, even to Africa. But then
look at the cache of arms that have come into Nigeria.
Yeah, just the other day.
Thankfully, we're seized by customs.
800 of arms and ammunition, then 2,000, you know, of the munitions.
Okay.
The question of border again comes in,
right.
You know, because there's talk of, you know, people coming from outside Nigeria to cause mayhem in Nigeria.
Okay, so let's look at the top stories in the Times. Can we pull that up? The Times. We're looking at the international papers now. Labour set for biggest majority since 1832. Wow, that's huge. Polls show Starmer heading to number 10 with 431 MPs as Sunak issues final appeal to voters. This is extraordinary turn of events in the UK. Elections are happening today. there's still projected to be a landslide victory for the Labour Party. The Conservative Party seems to be in shambles right now, and you know what? They've had their run. Shagun.
Obviously, elections are like cycles. Sometimes the party is down, it comes up, then it goes down, and that's the pattern. I think that we must respect the sovereign right of Britons to freely pick their own leaders and weigh in only in terms of mild commentary and not overrun ourselves by trying to tell them who to vote for.
Concern us.
Yeah, who to vote for and who not to vote for. But if you follow the prediction of the pundits and you look at all of the pollings and all of the exit polls and the general mood in the country, the UK, when people are feeling that the cost of living is getting too high, the ruling party suffers. When people feel that government is speaking too much and they're not getting immediate impact, the ruling party suffers. It doesn't matter what name you call that party. Ideology is not driving choice. What is driving choice is the fact that electorate understands that they have a right to punish parties for not meeting their expectation. Bola UK will wait for the outcome, but it looks like it's going to be a Labour London.
Yeah, but you know, I don't think that the Tories were completely unaware that this was going to happen at this one.
Indeed, the Conservatives have been plagued in the last 14 years with austerity, Brexit, and scandal.
That Brexit, oh my God, that did it.
So they had it coming. Unfortunately, they had it coming. And on Friday, we would see a leader walk through the famous number 10 door, with the polls showing it's likely to be a Labour leader for the first time in a while. So no surprises there, but hey, polls also showed yesterday that, you know, the Tories gained, but not so much yesterday. From a 20-point lead, it's now about 17. So can anything happen? There are so many lessons to learn. We saw Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, even though the polls over the months had shown that his party was going to win landslide, he never gave up. He campaigned till 10 p.m. yesterday, and he was afraid of complacency.
Why would you be complacent?
Because, you know, sometimes politicians just think that elections are won, you know, by word of mouth. Elections are won because they are popular and the people, and then they go to bed.
And this one not there though, and you know.
So he went campaigning till the last minute yesterday. On the Tory side, we've seen so many things have been thrown at this campaign. Even last minute, they had to bring in, Rishi Sunak had to extend that olive branch to Boris Johnson. We know that the two men relationship has been sort of severed for a while now. But we saw Boris Johnson campaign for Rishi Sunak last minute. It was a sign of desperation for me. But let's see what happens. Tomorrow, the UK is going to have a new leader. Who is it going to be? Pundits say it's going to be a Labour landslide. How much of a landslide will it be? I think that's what we're waiting to see.
But the thing is that if Labour wins, it's going to be a totally different government.
And they have a long list of issues to deal with.
And a shift, dramatic shift, I think, in terms of policies.
Whether it's a shift of policies or dramatic shift, 41-21, that's what the polls are saying. The important thing, like Shago said there, which is poignant, is the fact that the only thing permanent in life is change. Secondly, the people have the power to determine who presides over their affairs. Thirdly, they must then understand they need to vote. And then the government in power must also understand that the people can send you out because they have the power, so they need, therefore, for you to work for the people, do the things that need to be done, and then they can bring you back. Starmer was talking about this is 14 years of Tory legacy that has wrecked the economy. I mean, what do you expect him to say? And he's cruising. So we watch and see what gives. You
know, and it will be interesting to see how Labour aligns with their counterparts or the party that wins in France. You know, they're predicting, you know, the far right will win. We don't know yet. There will be a second round of elections. But it'll be interesting to see how that alignment goes because they're terribly different parties and they have to work together within within Europe. Yeah, so we'll see how that goes. Let's quickly go to Financial Times. So anxious Democratic supporters press Biden to step aside for next generation. Well, since that CNN presidential debate, the pressure has been on Joe Biden to step aside. And sources cited by New York Times and CNN said the president knows his re-election bid is now in peril. The New York Times said much will depend on the upcoming appearances that he has. He has campaign stops in Mississippi, no, not Mississippi, in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania this weekend. Well, poor Biden.
He has an interview today.
Yeah, with George, is it the one with George Stephanopoulos?
Yes.
Well, he's slated to sit down with him. Poor Biden, he's been eviscerated since this debate occurred, not only by his opponents, also by members of his party who are now doubting whether he's able to carry the torch for them. But the question, you have to wonder, why did the Democrats leave this till late in the day, Segun?
There are 4 things that I want to comment on this one. First, the power of quality journalism. They took the story, they've been staying with it.
They've been spinning it, yes.
They've been metasizing it, and they've been making it the agenda issue. Journalists in Nigeria, take a cue. The second thing I want to say is that when you become old, you have not committed a sin by being old. Nature will take its toll, and you have to pass the baton to younger people who have the energy. Because every time you slip and fall, it's not just you. It's all our reputation, everything that is on the ground. And that's the way it is for a nation. Biden is feeling that. The third one is that when you have a political party that has to run government, it must have at the back of its mind systematic succession planning. There is no law that says that you can't be a one-term president, even in good old America. And the fourth and final one is that when you are coming up against a Donald Trump, who is just a behemoth when it comes to bringing the energy and the nationalism of the American people to the table, you need to be a whole lot having gift of the gab and eloquence and sharp mind and articulation, because you can't be and expect to win an election. Not in America.
Another topic here is the likely top contenders to replace Biden if he does step aside. A few names come up. Of course, the VP Kamala Harris. There's the Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer. There's also, she's a woman. There's California Governor Gavin Newman, Transport Secretary Pete Buttigieg. I think that's how it's pronounced.
Buttigieg.
Yeah, but I also hear that, the black women in the Democratic Party are saying, if you do not pick Kamala Harris, we're going to blow up this party at this one.
See, I do not envy the Democratic Party at this time, and generally Americans, like I said over the weekend. This is one election where I feel Americans are going to pick, the better from a bad bunch. On one hand, they have a convict, who is braggadocious, and then you have, on the other hand, a Joe Biden who age is taking its toll on him, is incoherent, sometimes losing his steps and all of that. And the American people have to make a decision. Now, for the parties, the conventions are fast approaching. Do they have enough time? I think time is really not on their side, like you said initially.
They said
why they had to wait.
It is going to be a logistical nightmare to change him at this time.
Exactly. And then there will be so many infightings at this time. Yesterday, he met with a couple of governors, Democratic governors, including some of the top contenders you've mentioned. When they addressed the press, well, we did not expect them to say anything otherwise. They did say that the president is not quitting and they do support him. So the body language coming from the Democrats right now is that Joe Biden will stay the race. However, there are those who are not really speaking out, who are still worried. The voters are worried. Democrats are worried. We only wish America the best. And I was just going to throw this to Mr. Shomi, who was talking about Nigerian journalists. How about the politicians?
That's a job.
How about the politicians?
Let me come in. I have a totally different view from all this. Journalists can make or mar you. And
Yes,
like
they do.
Shegu said, some people just took it up. And some of them are blowing it out of proportion, frankly, for me. I remember, I don't know which competition it was. Nigeria played against Algeria. This is very poignant. In the very first match of the competition, lost 5-1 to Algeria. They played in the final. The point here is, this is just one debate. And so there's this hue and cry. The man came out firing after that debate and was firing from all cylinders. The governors have come out and said, we're backing Joe Biden. So we watch and see what plays out.
Exactly.
The talk of, when I think of someone saying, step down, and I'm thinking in my head, are you people thinking, how many days to the election? And you're saying step, it doesn't even make sense, really.
Months to the election.
And you want somebody to step down. I think
Okay.
that'll be shooting yourself badly in the leg.
So we have a last story, Business Day, South Africa. Richest families splash on political parties. Corporate South Africa is plowing millions of rand into the coffers of political parties across the ideological spectrum. Major political donors include companies associated with Patrice Motsepe, for instance, African Rainbow Minerals and Harmony Gold. The Oppenheimer family is also donating generously. They gave nearly 50 million rand to the DA. They also gave to IFP and Action SA. This information is now readily available since the secrecy surrounding political funding was lifted in 2022. The Political Party Funding Act, which became law in 2021, forced parties to disclose all donations above 100,000 rand, whether in cash or kind. Well, a slash of fronts right there, business and politics mixing. But this first disclosure is necessary and an excellent way to know who is influencing who, Shegu. Quickly, we have less than a minute. Quickly.
Yeah. I think that once parties are driven by set ideologies, then it makes it easy for anybody, rich people, poor people, to decide which of those parties represent their ideological, underpinnings. But if you don't have ideological parties, then people must go into election funding based on the personality that they like. And ultimately, that's too risky. Funding is good. Funding has to come from somewhere. But unless you know precisely what ideology those parties are picking, then you are not able to consistently support or not support them.
South Africa needs to be careful, because this reminds me of state capture, Zuma, the Guptas, and the sale of South Africa. So who is influencing? Does the influence of the families, influencing these parties, does it override the countries? South Africa has to be careful here.
Well, it looks like
It's
the
happened
US.
before.
Looks like the US, where you pour in money and the lobbying groups become very powerful. I don't think we have much time.
All right.
That's all we can take.
All right, that will be. Thank you, Shegu, showing me there, over there, and of course, Dr. Constance here. It's Daybreak, and it has been the paper review. Next on our bill is the morning show, and as you know, every day does matter here on Arise News. I am Ndi Amogo, thanking you for watching.
I am Adesua Omoruan. Good morning.